The month of October was a pretty wild one, with the stock market plunging temporarily and then quickly reversing all the way back up to where it started. Some specific sectors took some serious beatings this month, but generally I managed to remain largely unscathed in my own personal portfolio. Also, because of this drop, I invested $2,000 into my brokerage account this month, 1,000 of which are completely new, resulting in some pretty sweet buys which I will go over in this video. I will also talk about my general portfolio performance, and later I will talk about my future plans and what stocks I think look interesting at current levels. Anyways, let us get right into it. Before we start this video, make sure to like and subscribe if you're new to the channel because I will be posting dividend stock videos just like this one every few days. Firstly, let me talk about my new buys since my last video. Since my last video, I bought $2,090 worth of stock to try and capitalize on some of the drops. A part of this was funded by me selling completely out of one of my positions. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to time the low completely with these buys, but I still think in the long term they will prove to be successful as these prices were still pretty great. I bought stocks in 6 different companies this month and will go over them starting with the smallest buys and going to the biggest, but let me just really quickly go over my dividend income since the last video. So this month I received very little in dividend payments as only 2 companies paid me. The first of which was on October 16th and it was Main Street Capital, ticker MAIN, a BDC which pays monthly. This stock is a pretty high yield, sitting at around 7%, and it paid me $5.73, which isn't too bad for a stock that is paying monthly like I just said. The second stock that paid me this month is my only bank stock and in my opinion is the best bank stock, JP Morgan, ticker JPM. This stock paid me $23.29 on October 31st, which adds to my position nicely and is going to help with the snowball effect. This resulted in a total dividend income for the last month of $29.02, which is definitely lower than average, but that's really because I was only paid by 2 of my stocks. Okay, now that we're done with that, let me just go over my buys this month, and I purchased over $2,000 of stock. As I mentioned earlier, half of this was funded by me selling a position and the other half was new cash I deposited. Starting with the smallest purchase this month, we have Broadcom, ticker AVGO. I bought 0.2 shares of this company at an average cost of $826.89. This is way above my average cost basis, which is still in the low to mid 600s. However, I still think it is a fair price for the stock, and I want to make sure I have adequate coverage in the semiconductor industry because going forward, the world will rely on companies like this more and more. Broadcom, even now, still trades at a PE of around 26, which I think is very fair for the stock. My second smallest purchase, which was only $2 more than my Broadcom purchase, was Apple, ticker AAPL. I bought 1 share of Apple at an average cost of $169.87. This, again, was above my cost basis, which is something I generally try to avoid, but this buy was really just about adding more tech coverage to my portfolio. Stocks like this I am happy to buy into because I really like the underlying companies, even if it is a bit above my cost basis. Apple just reported earnings which were slightly negative, but I think generally this company has a bunch of ways to get more future revenue that mainly lie within its apps rather than its hardware, which I am looking forward to. In addition, the company currently pays a modest dividend that they can continue to grow easily, so I think getting in early rather than later will make my yield on cost better over time. My third biggest buy was JP Morgan, ticker JPM. I bought 2 shares of this company at a cost of $137.15 a share. This company, I think, was trading at a pretty good price and it is still sitting just slightly under my cost basis, so any opportunity to load up on some more shares is definitely a good one. As I said earlier, JP Morgan is, in my opinion, the best bank stock and I am very glad to load up on more shares. This stock has good growth potential, a good dividend, and outstanding leadership, which is why I like the stock so much. Although it is my only bank stock, it isn't my only financial stock, and that is where we get into my next biggest buy, Visa, ticker V. Visa is the best financial stock in my opinion outside of maybe Berkshire Hathaway, but that is a completely different business. This stock is a compounding machine with outrageously high dividend CAGR. It is a fantastic example of dividend growth stocks that I mentioned in my last video. Visa is a premium company and it trades at a pretty high price because of it. That being said, I was able to pick up 1.2 shares for $231.76 on average, which I say is a pretty good price for this fantastic stock. stock. Based on Visa's dividend, their dividend growth, and their capital appreciation, they do seem to be very fairly valued. My second biggest buy was the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index, ticker VTI. VTI is my anchor position, basically my position to make sure I do not steer too far away from the market trends. Although I do want to outperform the stock market, I still think having some overall indexes in your portfolio is the way to go because the market and individual stocks always have an element of unpredictability with them. I bought 1.6 shares at an average cost of $209.04. I'm looking to add more shares under the $210 mark. There isn't much to say about this, so I'm going to move on to my biggest buy this month, which is far above any other stock I bought, which is 15.8 shares of the Coca-Cola company at an average price of $55.64. This month, I actually bought my first share of Coca-Cola when the stock was trading in the mid-52s, but unfortunately I had no money at the time to invest and was unable to fully capitalize on the ultra low price. Despite this, I believe that my cost basis is still really good. If you've seen my older portfolio videos, you will know that I used to own Coca-Cola shares at an average cost basis of over $63, which I will admit was way too high. However, I sold the company at around what the current price is at, claimed a loss for tax purposes, waited over a month, and bought back in. Overall, I think this was a great long-term buy, and the company itself is extremely healthy despite some poor market sentiment in the past month or so. Overall, my buys this month gave me just under $50 of added income, which is equivalent to just around a 2.4% yield. This yield is a little higher than what I'm aiming for in my total portfolio, which is around 2%, but that is mainly because of the Coca-Cola buys, which I think overall is definitely okay. Now let me talk about my only sell this month. I sold Main Street Capital, ticker MAIN, for a total of $1,004.90. This stock isn't a bad stock by any means, and if it is in your portfolio, do not take my sell as an indicator at all. The real reason I sold this company is something I mentioned in my tier list video where I ranked this stock as the worst in my portfolio. Admittedly, Main doesn't really follow my principles of dividend growth, and I more or less just had it as a way to buff up my dividend income. However, I don't really need this income right now and just thought that there were better stocks out there at the time. This lost me over $75 of income, meaning overall for this month my income decreased, but I think the added growth will compensate heavily for this. Anyways, now that I've talked about the dividend income, the buys, and the sells, let us just look at the overall portfolio. As you can see, we are almost at $29,500, which is a sharp increase from my last video. I only have two positions which are currently in the negative, JP Morgan Chase and Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. This month, my portfolio has outpaced the stock market even if you do not include my $1,000 deposit. VTI currently makes up around 20% of my account, which I actually think is a little low. Moving into the future, I want it to make up even a little bit more. I'm looking at VTI to take up around 25% of my portfolio, which I know is a lot, but since it's a total stock market index, that's definitely not too much of a bad thing. My next biggest position is Microsoft. It currently sits at over 15% of my portfolio, which I think is a little bit too much, so I'm probably not going to be buying any more shares, especially at current prices, which is a good amount above my cost basis, and I think the stock is looking pretty pricey. Visa stock, if it ever gets near 230s again though, I will definitely be picking up more shares because even though it is my third biggest position, I really love the company. My fourth biggest position is Apple, which is up around 7%, which isn't too bad, especially considering it's down slightly after earnings, but I think Apple taking up around 13% of my portfolio is definitely fair. My next biggest position beyond that is Broadcom, my best position, which is up 40% despite the fact I bought it this year. I'm up over $1,000 on this position, which is definitely a great thing. Even though this is my best growth stock, it still pays a larger dividend than Apple, Visa, Microsoft, and VTI. Next biggest position after that is JP Morgan, and I talked about this a bit though. This is my favorite bank stock. Compared to some other banks in the recent correction, it hasn't performed as well, but that's because JP Morgan didn't fall as much as some of these other banks had because it's just a more resilient company in my opinion. I think JP Morgan is definitely a good play for added income and more money, even if the banking sector is a little bit less sturdy. My next biggest stock after that is United Health Group. I currently own around 5.6 shares of this company and it makes up around 10% of my portfolio. I really want to add more shares of United Health Group, but it's simply a little little bit too much above my cost basis. If the stock ever gets close back down to 500, it currently sits at around 530, I will definitely be picking up more shares because I really like this company as well. And then of course, my newest position, Coca-Cola. This stock is just a staple in many people's portfolios. There isn't a whole lot to go about. I've talked about Coke in so many of my videos in the past. It currently makes up 3% of my account, which is a little bit low, but I'm overall okay with it being my smallest position for now. Okay, now we're going to look at my dividend yield on my account. I'm currently sitting at $434.75 of dividend income annually. This makes it so my overall portfolio has a dividend yield currently at about 1.4%. This is a bit lower than usual for two reasons. Firstly, it's because I sold Main Street Capital Corp, which is by far my highest yielding stock. Also, because my stocks have been doing pretty well this month and have grown in price, the yield goes down because the yield percentage is inverse to price. The most dividend income I get from a single stock is currently JP Morgan, which makes sense. It is my highest yielding stock in my portfolio outside of Coca-Cola, which as you can see I own very little shares of. Combine this with the fact that I just received a dividend from JP Morgan that I talked about this video, and this dividend snowball is getting up and running, which I'm totally looking forward to. I'm looking forward to in the future making it so that my JP Morgan dividend payments buys me one new share every year, which I think will be very great. My goal overall is to make it so my dividends can buy one share every time they pay out. Obviously this is really dependent on the price of the stock, and this isn't really a great metric to go by it, but I think that will be very mentally reassuring and will look great every time I get a dividend payment to see I get a whole new share every time. Anyways, that's it for my dividend income. I want to really quickly go over what are my thoughts going into the future about this portfolio and what stocks I like right now. The future of this portfolio is really largely the same thing that I've been doing this month. It's going to be keep adding to these companies, these quality companies that I've picked out, especially if the prices are under my cost basis. I'm going to do this to keep growing my income and also just keep growing my portfolio overall. Some stocks that I'm looking at right now are currently three different ones. I'm looking at the Altria Group, ticker MO, Lowe's, ticker LOW, and BlackRock, ticker BLK. Admittedly, BlackRock and Lowe's have already corrected from their drop a bit, meaning the buy isn't as good as they were sometime earlier this month, but I still think at current prices, they're a pretty decent purchase. In terms of Altria, it's definitely a bit of a weird one. I know I just dropped Main because of the high yield, and it wasn't something I really needed, but Altria's prices are looking ultra low right now. This comes after an earnings report that said that many people were switching to alternatives that weren't owned by Altria because their price hikes were getting too expensive. Although that is bad news, a lot of their earnings guidance didn't justify the large drop, and you can tell this because the stock really quickly rebounded. I think at current prices, anywhere in the $40 range, the stock is looking very attractive. In addition, compared to Main, Altria has a 10% yield almost, which means it's almost 3% more, which is definitely not insignificant. Thank you guys for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, especially if you like my portfolio, make sure to comment why down below. If you think there's anything I can improve on though, let me know as well in the comments section. I hope you guys all enjoy these monthly updates. I'm looking forward to growing this portfolio slowly but surely. I'm aiming to reach $100,000 at some point, though that will definitely be a very slow process. Anyways, I will see you all in the next video. Thank you for watching and goodbye.